This is the Global Mom Show, episode 21. Hi, I'm Mary Grace Otis. I'm a wife, a mom of 3 boys, a former expat and development worker, and a freelance writer for nonprofits and businesses. I've lived in Germany and India and have traveled to lots of places besides that. But now I make my home in the U.S., where one of my goals is to stay connected with a global view of life. This is the show that connects you with moms around the world who want to live globally minded lives wherever they are and teach their kids to do the same. I'm so excited to be back this week after a few weeks off. I had a great break and was able to do several interviews, and I'm excited about the upcoming episodes of the Global Mom Show. Before we get started today, if you haven't signed up for my newsletter on the website, I have a new way for you to do that really easily. You can just text the words Global Mom to the number 444999. And you will be automatically subscribed to the email. You'll get the emails where I share some links that I'm loving online and I give a few more personal stories about my own life. I promise I won't clutter your inbox. It usually comes once a week, sometimes a few weeks off in between there. Today, we're talking about something a little bit personal, and that is birth stories. My guest is Lisa Ferland, who is the editor of the anthology Knocked Up Abroad and the new anthology that's currently in the works on Kickstarter, Knocked Up Abroad Again. Lisa is a U.S. citizen who has lived abroad in Sweden since 2012, working as a writer, editor, publisher, and a public health consultant. She's currently raising a Lego lover and a Pippi Longstocking fanatic who she says enjoy behaving like Swedish children with the added bonus of American Thanksgiving holidays. Today we're going to talk about the books, her dramatic birth story, and I'm even going to give you a special way to share your birth stories. So stick around till the end to hear how you can do that. Now let's get started. Hi Lisa, welcome to the Global Mom Show.
Thank you.
Why don't we get started by having you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your family?
Sure. My name is Lisa Ferland, and I am a U.S. citizen living in Sweden and have been for almost 5 years now. And I am mother to 2 children, ages 5 and 2. And my husband is also American, so we're a family of 4 living in Sweden.
And when did you move to Sweden and what brought you there?
We moved in January 2012 when it was very dark in Sweden, and we moved from Atlanta, Georgia in the U.S. where it was sunny and warm. And it was a complete opposite shift in weather and, of course, culture. And we went there for my husband's job.
Did you grow up in Atlanta or did you grow up overseas at all?
No, I didn't. So I grew up in upstate New York and then went to university in Florida and then grad school in Atlanta, Georgia. And we did a lot of international travel and had a lot of experience. I did live abroad in Southeast Asia for 3 months in grad school as part of my studies there. But other than that, this was our first large relocation.
Okay. Now, tell me about your work. You have a master's degree in public health. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Okay. And are you still able to use that over in Sweden?
I am. Yes. So I have been working as a public health consultant since I am not fluent in Swedish. I can still use my degree by consulting with international organizations where the language is in English, as well as U.S. organizations and the government, which is sort of my job in my previous life. So it's nice that I can kind of work from home and do the remote gig while still using the degree that I worked very hard to achieve in the first place.
Right. Yeah. Now, tell me about your foray into writing and editing. Your first book is Knocked Up Abroad, and now you have a second book coming out in that series. Let's go back to the beginning and just talk about how you got the idea to come up with a book of birth stories from overseas.
Yeah, it really started from a summer trip that we took. We took a family trip back to the U.S., and I've only been a parent in Sweden. I mean, I gave birth to my son in the U.S., but we moved when he was a baby. And so my real experience with parenting and playgrounds and other parents is all been in the Swedish culture. And I hit a major culture shock moment when we were at a playground in Hoboken, New Jersey, which is, pretty much New York City. And I just had all these things. And I'm like, why does this feel so weird? Like, why are the parents doing these things? And it was a total culture shock moment. And I wrote about it. And it was published in the Wall Street Journal Expat, and it just struck a chord with a lot of people. And I was like, I think there's something here. And so I just kept asking questions, and people were saying, you should write about the cultural divide between what was and what is, what you were used to and what you're experiencing now as it pertains to pregnancy, birth, and parenting abroad. And I was, okay, I don't know how to write a book. Like, what am I doing? I'm a public health consultant. I can write academic articles, but I wasn't a creative writer. And I've only had 2 experiences between the US and Sweden. And so I thought it was a little, I guess, conceited to think that someone would want to read about my life. But I was more interested in other people's experiences. And so I started asking, has anyone else experienced this before? This sort of, different cultural customs, and pregnancy is such a vulnerable time in a mother's life, and there's so many unknowns. And then you have all these other obstacles you have to jump over, in addition to being nervous about, giving birth and all the rest. And so the women I connected with were so positive, and their stories were so fascinating, interesting, and different. And so everyone had a different experience, and I just absolutely loved discovering all the differences. And that's what made the first book. And so we have 24 stories about pregnancy, birth, and parenting in foreign countries, in, I think, 21 countries in the first book. So it really was a broad range of experiences that we could share. And the response from the expat mom community was just so positive, and reinforced that this was an interesting idea. It wasn't just me who found it interesting. Other people did.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, birth stories are always interesting. There's just something that's so bonding about women. It's almost like telling war stories. It's become that way. Like, well, this is what happened to me. And I mean, I remember after I had my first child, some of my friends came over and they're like, tell me all about it. What was your labor like? What was the pushing like? What did this happen? And I mean, it's just kind of a way to connect. And it really is like, it's almost like an initiation into a new stage of life. It's really unique. So you also have some stories from dads in there. Tell us about how you found all the contributors, and what are some of the places that they're from?
So all of the contributors, I, kind of just hit up the internet and tried to find people who had written about their expat life abroad and who were interested in my project. And I had to really sell this idea, like, okay, I have this book. And they would ask me, have you ever published a book before? No, but, you should trust me with your life story. And so I had to really, find these people. But the stories were just, even though not all of the contributors were professional writers, the way they wrote their stories and the way that you can feel the emotion in them. And I think that makes them so compelling. But we have stories in Japan and Sweden and France and Australia and New Zealand and Malaysia and the Netherlands and Switzerland, and kind of they're just all over. Benin, West Africa, England, and New York City. And so there are expats living everywhere. And it's just as fascinating to me to hear about how someone from a foreign country thinks about American birth culture as it is, Americans and British expats, what they think of other countries' birth cultures. And I found everyone just through kind of connections. Like, you make one connection and then they say, oh, and I know this other person and they gave birth over here. And you just keep, finding and digging around. And I asked a lot of questions in Facebook expat groups, and eventually a book was made.
Now, tell us about one of those stories. You mentioned New York City was one. So tell us about that one. What were some of the cultural differences that came up?
That was Katarina Holm Didio, and she gave birth. She's Finnish, and so she gave birth in New York City, and her husband has French family. And so she kind of had a multicultural influence where she had her Finnish background. There's the culture of New York City, which is definitely an international melting pot. And they were friends with so many other international families that they celebrated other cultural traditions, like the Korean tradition of celebrating the first 100 days of birth. And she just kind of talks about how living in a city, and she describes the New Year's Eve fireworks while she's nursing her baby from their penthouse apartment in Manhattan. And this is really, you're like, oh, the snow is falling and the fireworks are going off, and I don't have a penthouse apartment in Manhattan, so I don't know what that feels like, but I can imagine, and it seems like a nice experience.
Right. What are some of the things that you found to be commonalities between all of the different stories?
Well, I think the major commonality and the most reassuring for me is that there is no one way to be pregnant. There's no right way to give birth. There is no perfect way to parent. And because of all of the different experiences, I mean, in Benin, West Africa, Sarah Murdoch gave birth to a baby where there was no running water or functioning toilets. And her baby, was fine and healthy, and it was okay. And so I think that, to me, that's reassuring when you're in a place that's completely foreign and you don't know what to expect, that, of course things can go wrong, and things do. But in many cases, you're going to be okay. You're just going to be fine. And all of the recommendations, like limiting coffee consumption or staying away from certain foods, all those things are cultural, and they have cultural significance for specific reasons. But once you understand that it's cultural and it's not do or die, and that there are people around the world who don't do this at all, it might reduce some of the stress that you're feeling.
Mm-hmm. I just came across an article in the Atlantic that was talking about, is parenting as big a deal as we think it is, basically. And they were saying that, like, it was some anthropologists that had studied, I'll put a link to it in the show notes, that had studied cultures all around the world. And they said, parents do things that they think are to have a certain outcome, but people in other countries do completely opposite things because they want to have a different outcome, but the kids still all turn out okay. So, I mean, whether or not you nap your kids on a regular schedule or let them co-sleep or, teach them how to be potty trained when they're 5 months old, or try to wait till they're 4 years old in America or whatever.
Exactly.
I mean, there's all these different cultural things that play into that. So that's a fun article too, because it talks about kind of the whole anthropology of parenting. Now, are most of the people that are featured in your book, most of your contributors, are they mostly from a Western perspective, would you say?
I would say so, yes. And the reason for that is that it's an English book, and so I think English needs to sort of be a native language, or a language, in order for the writing to be high enough quality. So we didn't really have too many contributors. Candace Kabutihan Sitbulo is she's a naturalized U.S. citizen from, I believe, the Philippines. And so she was our only contributor from Southeast Asia.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, that's interesting too, that it's a Western perspective on some of these places. And it would be interesting also, I think, to get a local perspective of what it's like to birth around the world. When I was pregnant, I read a book called Childbirth Wisdom that talked about some of the natural practices all around the world and through traditional cultures. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Can you tell us, you mentioned that you included some stories from dads in the first edition. Did you do that in the second edition as well?
We didn't have any dads submit stories for the second edition. So the first edition, I was reaching out to everyone I knew. And one of the dads was my husband, and the other dad was his friend. And so It was really, I'm like, I need parenting stories, and I need to round out my book. And I really loved having the perspective of the dads in the book. And when I put out the call for submissions for Knocked Up Abroad again, no males applied.
Okay.
I didn't receive any stories. So I guess it didn't hit their radar, but I would definitely love to include more stories with dads, because I do think that they have a different perspective. But really, mothering and parenting abroad is different based on, if your gender roles and how your culture values, mothers versus fathers. So it's very interesting.
Well, we're not going to get too much further without me asking you to tell your birth story because I read it the other day and I was just like, oh my goodness, this is definitely one that, like you said, it's dinner party worthy. So I'm sure you have to share it a lot. So it's in your book, the first book, Knocked Up Abroad, but why don't you go ahead and just take us through, a abbreviated version of your 2 births that you've had.
Okay, so my first birth, I was in the US. We were living in Atlanta, Georgia at the time. Completely, typical American style. And I say that, I was having contractions at home, called my midwife, and she said, come in, the whole thing. We go in the middle of the night, and I'm still having my contractions. They're starting to get more intense. And so I request an epidural. I have my epidural and Pitocin, and I pushed out a baby, within 15 minutes. It was a very calm, wonderful experience. We moved to Sweden when he was 9 months old, and I get pregnant and go through the whole prenatal system. And I'm describing this very wonderful, in my mind, this very wonderful birth experience. I didn't experience any pain. It was wonderful. And yes, I used drugs, but I was fine with that. And the Swedish midwife was like, like just kind of like giving me this look like, yeah, that's just not going to happen here. And I began to do research and talk with my other international mommy friends who had given birth in Sweden. They said, yeah, no, you're probably not going to get an epidural. And I was like, well, why is that? And they said, well, because the way the Swedish system works is that you don't know where you're giving birth until you're in labor. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem like a very efficient system. I don't know why they do it that way, but it's because, there's limited space in the hospitals. And so if your desired hospital is full, they will route you to a different one, but you have no idea where that is. Because if you're giving birth at a very popular time with a lot of other Swedish women, you're going to get bumped to a different hospital. So to me, in my mind, this seems very stressful. And why they continue to do it is beyond me. But that's, a downside, I suppose, of socialized medicine. Anyway, so I was like, okay, I know that subsequent births, so non-first-time births, generally move faster, and the Swedish midwives are probably not going to give me an epidural anyway, and I'm probably going to arrive at the hospital late. So I'm going to have to do this on my own, and so I looked into alternative pain relief methods, and hypnosis. Self-hypnosis came up time and time again. I checked the reviews on Amazon, and Hypnobabies, the specific course, received such wonderful reviews. I was like, okay, even if it doesn't work, I'm still back at ground zero, but the chance is it could work really well. And sure enough, it did. And I was, I think, 41 weeks pregnant plus some days with my second baby, and I had been doing Hypnobabies for weeks. And I
have to interrupt you real quick, because one thing that you said in there, which I thought every mother could identify with, is when you said, when you think that it's better to have the baby out because you'll sleep more when it's out than you are when it's in. That's the time that you are ready. You know that you are ready.
Exactly. When you're
not agree more, even though it's not really true.
It is not true at all. But yeah,
it feels true because you're not sleeping either way. So just get the thing out of me so that I can pretend like I am sleeping.
Exactly. Like I want to sleep on my stomach again. Thank you. Get this baby out. That's when you know it's time. You're ready. Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Sorry. I just had to interject that. Keep going.
So it was Sunday, and, I'm very, very pregnant over 40 weeks. And I start to feel weird. Like, how you just can't describe. You just start to feel weird. And I felt weird. And I'm like, okay, maybe I should go take a shower and try to relax. And so I put on my hypnosis tracks, and I was relaxing and doing my thing and breathing. And I started to feel, the pain, the aches in my back. The pain in my back. And it was pain is a term. I guess it was just discomfort in my back, and I was having back aches. And with my first birth, the back aches radiated to the front, and then I had full belly contractions. I was waiting for that moment. And, just going in and out, walking around, talking to my husband. My husband was playing with our son upstairs, just kind of moving around the house. And I was in and out of the bathroom doing what women do when they're laboring. And I reached down and felt her head. I was like, oh no.
Oh my gosh.
Oh no. And for an insane split-second moment, I considered holding her in until like the ambulance could arrive. I don't know why that thought went through my brain and I gave it as much consideration as I did. But I'm like, I can just hold her like this. I can just keep her in this way. It's totally fine. It was not. And so she just came out. Like it wasn't painful. It was a complete surprise. I was that cliche.
How much time had passed?
Maybe an hour and a half.
Okay.
From like feeling weird to giving birth. I mean, there was like no time.
Word.
There was no time. And the Swedish midwives judge how far along you are in labor by talking to you. And so you call the hotline to find out if you can give birth at your hospital, and they engage you in conversation. You're like, come on, lady, like let me in. But they're waiting for 2 or 3 minutes where a typical contraction would occur, so they can judge how far along you are based on how you're talking.
Wow.
And real scientific method there.
That's neat.
But it was enough for them. They wouldn't have known, because I was having normal conversations. They would not have known that I was as far along as I was. I certainly didn't know. And I had given birth before, so I felt very unaware. And I was like, I am now that person in a tabloid who doesn't know they're pregnant or just doesn't know they're in labor. I'm like, how does this happen? And so I credit Hypnobabies. I had a completely comfortable childbirth experience. And I think another moment that a lot of women can relate to is when you're like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I don't know if I can handle it anymore. And that's when you're almost done. And I got to that moment where I'm like, these backaches are so intense. I don't know if I can keep going. And it wasn't, I'm done, I'm quitting, I'm out of here. But it was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And I had no idea that I was so close to the end at that point.
Yeah. And so you just had the baby right there. And
I just had the baby.
Your husband called 911 or whatever the number is, 412 or something.
412. He ran out of the house and literally ran out of his shoes. His shoes were in the street, looking for help. And it was a bit of chaos after the birth, which was not ideal. You figure, when you have your baby, it's going to be this natural thing and you're going to put the baby on your chest. I didn't even do skin to skin because I was so shocked. I was so completely shocked. I just had the baby. I had my daughter on my shirt. I was like, oh. Yeah. And so, it was all those things where if I was in a controlled environment, if it was a little more planned, I would have done all the things I wanted to do. But instead, we had excessive delayed cord clamping, which I know is like a thing everyone talks about, just because we had to wait until people could arrive to cut the cord.
Okay. So they did it when they got there.
Yes, they did.
Okay.
They cut the cord when they arrived, but it was probably 25 minutes after she was born. So she should have superhuman powers from all that
really,
delay.
Really. That was one of my biggest fears with my third child is like, what if I just have the baby in my house?
Mm-hmm.
Because you just don't know how fast it's going to happen.
I know.
It ended up I had plenty of time, but then I went into transition really quickly, and all of a sudden my contractions, which had been like 3 minutes apart for like a couple hours, were suddenly like every 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I would have had the baby in the car if we had hit a pothole. I mean, it would have just all come out, because as soon as I got to the hospital, it was like 20 minutes later, and he just came right out. So
you're like, I'm having this baby now.
Crazy. I got there and I was like, please tell me I don't have to push this baby for 2 hours. Because my first son, I did have to push for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, I can't do that. My second son was quicker, but I had a little bit of Pitocin because my water had broken. So they wanted to help move it along. So I wasn't sure what this one was going to be. And, it's just so much uncertainty during that time. And you're like, what is going to happen? So
exactly. Yeah. I wish, and I told my husband, and he thinks I'm ridiculous, but I was like, I wish I had experienced the Swedish midwife process, because I didn't give birth in a hospital. And he just looks at me, he's like, you're ridiculous. Like, you had this wonderful experience. It was at home. You were comfortable. It was pain-free. Like, what do you want? But I kind of wanted to, see how the midwives would do it. Like, how is it in a midwife-driven system? What are their tools, their things, I don't know. I was curious, but I didn't get to.
And how did they respond when you were at the hospital?
Oh, they just surrounded me like I was they were like, wow, no one shows up with a baby. No, it was nice. I was holding court and just, they were, tell us more.
Yeah.
And then what happened? And my midwife, who I've been having my prenatal appointments with, she's like, you should give seminars and tell the Swedish women all about this. I was like, oh, I don't know. But she definitely wanted to, share the story and because it's a remarkable story. And again, if it hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't believe that it was possible.
Well, I have another friend that delivered her third child in the car on the way to the hospital, like 5 minutes away. It was just like, okay, here it is. I'm like, are you kidding me? But well, that's really a wonderful story. So tell me some of the biggest cultural differences that you've noticed in parenting in Sweden and the US. You mentioned the playground story when you were in Hoboken, New York. Tell us about that. What was it that stood out to you?
I think the level of hovering is quite different. And it's interesting because, Sweden, really, they love their children, but they would never like follow them around on the playground. They would never prevent them from falling, if that makes sense. And I don't want to sound that they are like careless or negligent, but just that they understand that kids fall and bones break and it's not a big deal and you're going to be fine. And I think that's part of the culture is that, they have more flexible work-life schedule. So if their child does break a bone, they can stay home with them while they heal, and so it's not unlike, in the US where it's like, no, I have no sick time or I have no extra vacation time or I have none of these things. Like you can't get hurt. And so there are, and I don't want to be too, I don't want to generalize too much because there's always danger in that because all parents are different. And I understand that, but I think, if you're looking at it from the higher level, the US has, I guess, less support or less flexibility when it comes to allowing children to be children or in allowing parents to allow their kids to be a little more free range and doing things that they might get hurt. Whereas in Sweden, it's like, oh, okay, your child broke their leg, no problem. You can work from home, for 50%, whatever you need to do, you take care of your family. And it's done without repercussion or, losing, you're still eligible for bonuses, you're still eligible for promotions. I mean, it's all those things. And that's built into the culture and the social norms. So I think that's a huge difference is just sort of the amount of letting your kids just go off and explore within reason. But there have been numerous times where, I look, you look out your front window and you see a parent who's looking for their child and you go, oh, he's over there. And you point him in the right direction and then they go collect their child and walk home. They're not following them constantly.
Well, and I think that's how it used to be. I mean, when I was growing up in the States, we would all get in a group and ride our bikes up and down the street, play in different people's backyards and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now that would never happen. I mean, it does happen in some close-knit neighborhoods, but not in a big kind of free range way.
Yeah. And I don't know anymore because again, I'm not parenting in the US. And so when I hear things like that, it's shocking to me, but I know that I consider Sweden basically like the 1950s, but with institutionalized feminism and Wi-Fi. Like we have the open freedom to play and let kids be kids, but with all the modern amenities of modern day. And so I think it's nice. It's a nice place to be.
Your husband wrote a story in the first book about taking parental leave in Sweden. How does that work? And how did it work for your family?
It's a very good question because he is the breadwinner in our family. Since I quit my job and went to freelancing, it's a little less stable and we kind of dropped in income a little bit. And so when we considered him taking parental leave, this is kind of a big risk budget-wise for our family, but we're like, let's give it a try. And parents in Sweden are provided 480 days of paid parental leave. And you can split the days however you want. So one parent can take half, the other parent. And so I told him, I'm like, you take as much as you need for our daughter because you're the only one who can get paid for it. My income isn't high enough really to make a difference. So the paid parental leave at the time is more valuable for you and you'll never get this experience again. Because this was our last child. We're like, we're done. And you can take paid parental leave until your child turns 8. So again, you can spread it out however you want. Yeah. It's use it or lose time. So once they turn 8, you kind of lose it. So he decided to take 6 months paid parental leave, but he stretched it out over almost 8 months because he got paid, 3 days a week or 4 days a week instead of every day. And so depending on your budget, you can really stretch out how much time you have. And
Now,
he
is this
loved
paid
it.
from the government or from
Yeah, so
the workplace?
both.
The government.
So,
Okay.
right. So your taxes, it's all tax subsidized. That's why we pay 50% in tax because
Okay.
so many people are drawing from it. It's all very complicated. I'm not really sure we did it the right way, but we did it and it worked out. It worked out pretty well. And so for me, since we were now both at home, I was working from home and he was home with the kids. I was like, you're in charge then. Like if you're going to be home on parental leave, this is now your job. Like you're going to be taking care of it, and I'm going to pretend like I'm not here and I'm not going to answer your questions because I wanted him to figure it out. No one was answering my questions when I had them. No one was helping me remember to pack diapers before I left for the grocery store. So I was like, yeah, you can figure it out. You're an adult. And he did. And he definitely made mistakes that were memorable in terms of, not packing enough clothes or forgetting to pack food. But I think the learning experience for him and the bonding time that they had as dad and child and children, because he would go and pick up our son from preschool as well. It was just so priceless. I mean, we can't ever get that time back. And we ended up doing a lot of travel together as a family and went to France and really like kind of blew through our budget because we were like, we're never going to have this time again. And so we had these incredible experiences traveling as a family and really just having a lot of quality time. So that those 8 months were just full on parenting and our children having both parents home at the same time. And for me, that's unbeatable. I can't ask for anything better.
What are some of the revelations that you've had about birthing and parenting in different countries through reading some of the stories that you've read in these anthologies? What are some of the big things that you've realized or come to understand?
I think in many countries, they are more family friendly. They may not be more family friendly for expats because they may rely on extended family to do certain things. And I'm thinking of more the Asian countries where, there's the confinement period of 30 days after giving birth and your family is expected to care for you in that time. And as an expat, if you don't have family nearby to observe this custom, you're kind of out of luck. You're kind of on your own. And so I think that there are a lot of countries that are known for being very family friendly, but when you're an expat, you're kind of in this middle zone where it's not quite as family friendly for you as it is for the local people. So that's an interesting dynamic that I don't think I quite understood before I started reading all of these stories. Like, okay, you're in a very family friendly country. Why are you still struggling? Because no matter where we go or how family friendly a country is, it's still really hard to be away from your support network and to be away from family and friends who you can rely on and ask those last minute, oh my gosh, I need help. Can you come over and help me? That's hard to do when you have a network of expat friends who say they'll do things for you, but maybe don't feel comfortable asking. And so I think that was different. And I didn't expect to kind of realize this is the universal truth. It's just hard to live outside your network. And when you're an expat parent, in most cases, you're very much on your own and you have to become very self-reliant, and there may be more pressure put on your relationship with your spouse because you have to be extremely independent and resourceful and flexible and all those things to provide the kind of life you want to have for your family.
How do you recommend that families prepare for this if they're going to be pregnant or giving birth overseas? What is some advice that you could give them?
I would definitely say to make as many local connections as you can with other expats who have given birth in that country and in that specific location. You can do a lot of research beforehand to find out what hospitals people recommend, what their experiences were, and really, make those kind of say, hey, can I take you out to coffee and can we talk about your birth story? With the understanding that everyone has a different birth experience. And so one person's nightmare hospital is another person's dream hospital. So you kind of need to keep that in mind. And then also, be prepared to be uncomfortable, be prepared to not understand always what's going on if there's a huge language barrier. And I would say that the women who have given birth outside of their native language, again, luckily I gave birth at home. I was totally comfortable birthing in English. But if I was in a hospital where they were speaking Swedish to me or Swedish around me, I might not have felt as comfortable. And so it might help to bring along a translator or a friend who's bilingual who can do a lot of the translations for you so that you don't have to birth. So you can birth in your language and they can make your wishes known as, for you, kind of be your proxy, your advocate. I think that's really important, especially during labor and delivery. You're whole focused on your body and what's happening with you. And there's no room for translating anymore. Like you're not thinking about, oh, what's the word for this? And you don't want to worry about that. So my advice is do a lot of research, ask a lot of questions to a lot of people, and then, bring along a multilingual or bilingual advocate to help you out.
That's a great idea. I had a doula with my third birth, not my other two, but by the third one, I just thought, I don't have the mental capacity for this. I've got 2 other kids. I've got all these responsibilities. I don't have time to prepare. With the first one, I did a lot of internal work, like mentally preparing through birthing from within and other types of hypnosis or visualization type things. With my third one, I was like, I don't have time for all this. I'm just about to have a baby and I don't even know what to do. So I had a doula and it was very, very helpful. And my sister, she lives in Tanzania and she had her first baby in Nairobi. And it was an English speaking hospital, a very good hospital, but a lot of things were different and just the communication style was different. And she wound up having an emergency C-section. It was challenging, but she did have a doula who was with her and then came with her to their apartment and helped her with some of the breastfeeding. She spoke English, so she could kind of be an intermediary between the hospital staff and my sister. And I think doulas are awesome for that reason, just so that you have an extra person that's thinking about you and your needs in the space. And I can only imagine that overseas it would be an even greater thing to have, because you have someone that you can communicate with for months beforehand. So even if you do wind up in a different hospital than you thought you were going to with a totally different person, you have like your person that
exactly
is going to be there with you.
That sense of familiarity will reduce stress, and that is the most important. I think mothers should be looking at, how can I reduce my stress? Because this is such an emotional and can be very stressful time. Your job is to stay relaxed and just focus on having a baby. So yeah, if you can cut through the noise with a doula and an advocate, yes, by all means, it's well worth it. In my mind anyway. And from everyone I've talked to, including you, had such wonderful, beautiful experiences with a doula. So yeah.
Yep. Tell me about the second book. Why did you decide to go and put together another book?
It kind of forced itself on me. When the first book came out and I shared it, the feedback was like, well, I missed the call for submissions. I'm like, well, there wasn't no call for submissions. They're like, I want to share my story. And I was like, okay. So there was a lot of discussion around the first book, and I decided, okay, let me just put out a call for submissions and see what happens. See who submits a story. And so I got invited into these writers groups on Facebook, and the call for submissions, when I posted in those writers groups, the writing was just on another level in terms of the complexity and the emotion and the sophistication of the writing. And so this book came together in such a positive, collaborative way amongst professional writers that it's really been wonderful working with all of the contributors. And they have a ton of content and blogs that the readers can explore after, because that was another comment, was that the readers of the first book wanted to continue the story. They wanted to continue learning about the writers. And when you work with established writers, they have a much richer portfolio to continue that exploration. And so I'm really excited to offer that to readers, is that, the book is just one of many stories that they have written. And so you can go off and find them and go to their websites and really continue to explore and continue the Not to Broad journey in their ways.
Now, you're currently in the middle of a Kickstarter campaign for the book, Knocked Up Abroad Again. Tell me about that campaign, what your goals are, and what the rewards are.
Yes, so I think we're 9 days into a 30-day campaign, which is going really well and generating a lot of excitement. And this is to fund the publication of Knocked Up Abroad Again, the second book in the Knocked Up Abroad series, which is really, we are trying to challenge the preconceived notions women have about pregnancy, birth, and parenting by sharing all of these stories from 25 different countries around the world. We're introducing even more ideas and challenging cultural norms and saying, there is no one way to be pregnant and give birth and parent your child, and here's why. And readers will really enjoy all the different stories. This book also contains stories about loss, which is something the first book didn't cover. There are a few chapters that discuss miscarriage and sort of the emotional hole that's torn into your life when you lose a child, and how is that experienced by expats who don't have that familial support to help them through such a difficult time. And so we didn't cover that in the first book in quite as much depth. And so this will be, I think, an opportunity for women who have experienced that to find some healing. And then, of course, healing for the writers themselves. Because I think when you write about something and you give it life, you're sort of breathing life into your experience. And it's comforting in a way to say, okay, this is out there and I shared it and it was hard. And now I can move on. I can heal from this whole process. And so the Kickstarter is supporting all of these women and making their dreams come true by getting this book out there to the world. So of course you can get the ebook and the paperback, both books in this series. And then we have these great packages, Mommy and Me package, which has 2 additional ebooks, techniques for a comfortable childbirth experience with or without drugs, because we are a non-judgmental zone. So however you want to do it. And also another ebook, What I Wish I Had Known Before Raising My Family Abroad. And that was a collaborative experience with all the contributors, adding their insights and wisdom about what they wish they had known. And so there were a lot of things that I learned. And so I think that's also a great resource for every parent to have. And then Debbie Beaumont has contributed her book, An Alphabet of Africa, which is this beautifully hand-illustrated, hand-painted alphabet book that features a mother and a child animal from Africa for every letter of the alphabet. And it's really a fantastic book. And that is in the deluxe Mommy and Me package.
Okay.
There are a lot of other packages, and there are other packages not just for moms, but if you want to develop your writing, we have expat Mom Coaching by Christina Pop. And so really just a lot. And then one package called the International Baby Box, which is totally unique. And all of the contributors are contributing baby items to this International Baby Box that have cultural significance in the country in which they are living.
Now, where can we find you and the project online?
You can always find me at knockedupabroad.eu, and I am on Facebook and Twitter.
And there is another knockedupabroad.com, I believe, that is not you. So
that is not me. I think that's
telling
just
everyone
sitting
that.
there.
Not you.
I think someone's just hogging that URL. Like, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with it. No, knockedupabroad.eu.
Great. Well, Lisa, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to reading more stories from around the world and learning more. So I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to share it.
Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening today. As I was editing this episode, I had the idea that I really love hearing birth stories, and I want to hear more. I want you to share your story. So I thought about what might be the best way to do this, and I came up with a couple of ideas. First of all, I would love for you to share a tidbit of your story over in the Global Moms Network. It's a Facebook group that's closed and private, so you can post pictures, share the funniest thing that happened, the biggest cultural faux pas, the scariest moments, or the weirdest things that happened, or the joyful things that happened. And it doesn't have to be a knocked up abroad story, since I know that many of us global moms were not abroad when we had our babies, but we still have stories to share. So head over to facebook.com/groups/the Global Moms Network. I will put a link in the show notes for you. That is one way to share, and another way is for you to actually call in and leave me a message with your story. I can take snippets of those stories and compile them into some bonus material, maybe even an episode. Maybe I'll tack some onto other episodes. And I have a special number for you guys to call in and leave your messages. It's a US number, but you can call it from within your Google account if you have one. It's 657-GO-GLOBE. That's 657-GOGLOBE. If you have a message that's only 90 seconds or less, you can leave that through the voicemail on my website. But if you have a longer message or a whole story, you can just call that number, 657-GO-GLOBE, and leave your message there. This will be super fun, and I can't wait to hear from you. Again, just share something unique about your birth story, something that was different because you were in a foreign country, or something funny or weird or beautiful that happened to you. Today's podcast is sponsored by Thrive Market, where you can get healthy, organic food shipped right to your door at discount club prices. That means 25 to 50% off of what you would pay elsewhere. We order a lot of our gluten-free items from them, as well as paleo snacks, and it's been super easy, great quality, and saves a lot of money. Thrive Market is a socially responsible company that's committed to providing the best products to its customers. And when you join, they give a membership to a family in need. So it's a win-win for everyone. Now, I have a special offer for you to get 1 month free, but you have to go to this address. It's bit.ly/globalmomthrive. That's bit.ly/globalmomthrive. That's all for this week. Find me on Facebook or Twitter if you want to chat. My Twitter handle is @theglobalmom. Have a great week, and remember, you can live a global life wherever you are and teach your kids to do the same.